I was born in Malvern, and my parents moved to Sparkman when I was 2. And so I grew up and graduated from high school at Sparkman, Arkansas, and went to Hendrix College. But when I was in public school, I felt a call for full-time Christian service. And I didn't really know that women could be pastors at that time. So I majored in religious education and planned on being a Christian educator. When I went to Perkins, all of the students had to take, there was no degree in religious education at that particular time at Perkins. And so all of us were required to take preaching and pastoral care and counseling, no matter what our career objective was. And I found that I enjoyed those too. And so I intended to be ordained, but to serve as a minister of Christian education. And actually, I think because of the internship that Perkins required, I found out what it was like to function in the pastoral role. And I felt like that was really where God was calling me to be. And I thought that churches need pastors that know something about Christian education. I always planned from college to go to seminary, but I thought that I would work a few years and save money for school because my brother finished high school the year I finished college, and I didn't want my parents to feel like they had any responsibility for my seminary education. Mm-hmm. And the only problem was no one told me that Christian educators were not paid enough to save money. So after serving full-time in Christian education in churches in Arkansas, I decided that if I was going to go, I just had to go on faith that was what I was supposed to do. And by that time, my brother was a student at Perkins. And when he would come home for a holiday, talking about classes that he was taking and so on made me really want to get on to seminary. And so I did, and got a campus job the first day I was on campus. Worked in the audiovisual office, so it just seemed like everything was worked out for me to go to seminary.
Wow. It's kind of funny how things just kind of fall together like that sometimes.
Right, yeah. They had a potluck in the residence hall, and the guy that was in charge of the AV office said they were looking for somebody to work there that could run of course, you can tell it was a difference in time period because it was a projector at that time. And of course, as a Christian educator, I'd had a lot of experience doing that sort of thing. So I got the job, like I said, the first full day I was on campus.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about your experience of, I'm guessing that you got an MDiv from Perkins at the time, or was it called something different? Or
it was actually a Master of Theology at the time. They later changed and went back to using the term of the MDiv, and we could pay a fee to get our certificate changed, but I chose to keep mine as it is. So
gotcha.
My diploma says Master of Theology.
If you were to talk a little bit about the process of seminary and getting to seminary, who were some inspirational people for you in those times, like that either pushed you in a certain way, helped you see something new about your call, etc.?
I would say primarily the religion professors at Hendrix at the time that I was there, all of whom are deceased now, I think. But Dr. James Upton and Robert Goodloe and Francis Christie were the professors that I had in the religion department.
Gotcha. And they helped you get kind of from, or get to seminary. You were a woman minister in the United Methodist Church, and obviously there's some successes in that because that's still a relatively new group of ministers in the United Methodist Church. So what are some successes you feel from your career as a minister?
I won't say that it's all success, but I enjoyed my ministry, particularly being a part of families within the congregations at times of birth and death and weddings and that sort of thing. And I was the first pastor that every church I had served had ever, first time let me try to start that over. I was the first female pastor that any of the churches I served had until my last appointment that started out as a 3-point charge. One of the churches closed and ended up being a 2-point charge, but all of those 3 churches had a woman before. So it took almost 40 years for me to hit a church that had a female previously.
Wow.
And in most of those, it was successful. There were a couple that were not particularly, that didn't want a female pastor. There were times that churches turned me down for being appointed there because even with not even knowing my name, but just because it was going to be a female. But there were only a couple of times that happened. There were other times that I found out later, people that had objections or concerns, but usually after you had a funeral, people accepted you. And in fact, one church that I served, the lay leader died suddenly on Saturday night at the dinner table. And after that, a couple of folks in the congregation told me that they were concerned about having a female pastor because they were concerned about a crisis that might happen, that they said they felt like I had handled the situation well, and they were glad that I was there, I guess. Also in that church, though, when they placed me, there was a woman who was in her 70s that said she couldn't say anything negative about it because her mother was the first female in, I think it was Illinois, but in the conference where she grew up.
Oh, wow.
So.
Wow, so that sounds like you had a lot of really good experiences as a woman minister, especially being the first woman minister in so many places. I hate to pivot off of that to this, but can you talk about a moment in your journey, either before seminary, during seminary, after seminary, where your faith was challenged by something and how you responded to it?
I'm not thinking of a good answer to that right now.
Okay. If you want, we can come back to that one or
okay.
skip over that one.
I can, when you ask about successes, a couple of things that, because of being one of the early females in our conference, that I had the experience of, being elected to jurisdictional and general conference uh, serving on the Board of Ordained Ministry. That I was, I think, the second woman to do that. Fern Cook, who was one of the ones that actually the Methodist Church received from the Methodist Protestant Church before the Methodist Church was fully ordaining women. She had served just before I did. And then I was the first female district superintendent in Arkansas.
I think I actually heard that last night, because you were the DS in the South or Forest City area.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are some pretty impressive feats and kind of like break through a boundary that had been there for a long time and really interesting.
Yeah. And I also served 2 quadrennium on the General Commission on Religion and Race.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about what that was like?
Sure. It was a great experience. Was also got to find out a little bit about being a minority in a group because the Caucasians were a smaller number than the other ethnic groups put together. But it was a good experience for me with having grown up in Arkansas and not a lot of exposure to diversity in different ethnic groups. That to when we would have our meetings, they would be in an area when we would focus on a particular issue. Like we went to the Oklahoma Indian Mission Conference when we were looking at Native American issues. We met in Miami when we were looking at issues related to immigration. So we were supposed to tour a facility where immigrants were or undocumented were being detained until they were shipped back. However, a rainstorm prevented us. We got to drive by, but we didn't get to go in. But we would see the various situations and problems that different groups had to deal with, experienced different types of food. We met in Minnesota and went to a Hmong congregation and had Hmong food. Just a pretty wide variety of things related to that, but as well as working with folks on the commission from different backgrounds and getting to know more about their experience in the church. But it broadened my understanding a lot.
I can imagine. So with that in mind, you said you served 2 quadrennium. Has that shaped how you view some current events going on? Racial tensions are fairly high in our country and in our state.
Right.
Do you want to talk about how that experience on that committee led to or does it affect your beliefs about today and what you see, or any insights from that?
I think it has to affect it to some degree, but growing up in the 60s, the racial issues were important to me then and continue to be, with acceptance of others. But I guess where the serving on religion and race would have the greatest impact would be that with looking at, for instance, the antagonism toward Asian folks, that I would understand that better because of knowing a number of Asian people personally that I would not have if I hadn't served on that commission.
Gotcha.
And I also know that was one thing that the commission works on, is trying to help the churches with understanding, with not only within the church, but in society at large.
Well, I guess you've already talked about this a little bit, but you were the first woman DS. You were the first woman in Arkansas sent to jurisdictional and the second sent to general conference, right?
I think it may be the other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not entirely sure about prior to me. Whether, like I said, Vern Cook would have been the one that might have gone, but I don't know whether she had or not. It's Board of Ordained Ministry that I said she was on before I was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No problem.
So are there any other offices that you have held or position committees you've been on that you are proud of, excited about, not just at the conference level, but local level, district level, whatever that might look like?
Right. I've served on almost all of them at one time or another in the annual conference. But I was the last chair of the Conference Council on Ministries for North Arkansas before we did away with the Council on Ministries. And and now I've forgotten what I was about to say about that. When I was elected district superintendent, the host pastor of the church where our district conference was being held, commented that was the first time a woman had presided over a district conference in Arkansas. And I had to correct him because I had presided over one when I was chair of the District Council on Ministries. I mentioned Conference Council, but this was for District Council. Our superintendent ended up in the hospital, and I had to preside in his place at the district conference. So it was, when I was superintendent, was not the first time that a woman had presided over a district conference.
So you did it before you were DS and then did it again.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's like a double first. Can you talk about some interesting people you've met through your years of ministry, whether that's congregants and just those? I assume every minister has those standout examples of Methodists that they've met that have affected them or affected how they see ministry. Just kind of opens.
I can think of a couple of district superintendents that I had in earlier years and how supportive they were of women in ministry. Bill Connell was my first district superintendent, and he was very supportive. My daughter was born while he was my superintendent, and there was one other pastor in the district who was on maternity leave at the same time I was, and he was so proud that he had checked, and he was the first district superintendent in the South Central jurisdiction to have two pastors on maternity leave at the same time. But in terms of how supportive he was, after our children were born, he started, then we had at least monthly preachers' meetings, which is something that has changed, but he provided childcare for district pastors' meetings. And it benefited some of the men as well as Marcia and I, because there was one single father that he always brought his preschool age kids to pastors' meetings after that was being provided. And another was Wayman Hollis, he was supportive of women in ministry. And I think a number of us that were serving then, were appreciative of Wayman and his efforts. But there's so many people that it's kind of hard to single out, just a few. But, there are lay people that I knew and early appointments that I kept in touch with through the years and felt support from them and friendship.
What has living through this pandemic taught you about United Methodism? How has it affected your life, and how is that, or you as a minister, what are some reflections or gleanings you might want to share from that?
I would say the support from, I don't know if you know that my husband died of COVID, and the two of us were hospitalized at the same time. I was only in 3 days, but the support that I received from other pastors and laity during the time that he was hospitalized and at the time of his death, I think is one of the biggest things for me. I'll also say I was thankful that I retired before we had to have the technology that it's necessary to have now with the live stream services and that sort of thing. And again, I don't remember if I'm answering the whole question that you asked.
I'm mostly asking about experiences and gleanings. I'm sorry to hear about your husband and that you were also hospitalized, I know.
Right. Yeah, and we were early because it was in March
Oh, wow.
of the first year of COVID that we were both hospitalized. And so it was a learning experience a lot because the medical profession didn't know that much initially. But
wow, so y'all were some of the first ones in Arkansas to get it.
yes,
That must
he was the 95th person to die in Arkansas.
Oh my. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I guess one thing about COVID in the church is I think that it, with not being able to have in-person services, that it helped people to realize that the church is not a building, which we've always known, but that ministry can continue through various missions to the community and to care for one another and that sort of thing, that it, I think, gave the church the opportunity to have a different understanding of what it means to be the church.
I think that's definitely true, and it shows how good ministry is also adaptive ministry, and
right.
Some churches are thriving and reaching different congregants, and it's just kind of neat to see that happen with all this. And is there any other words of wisdom for United Methodists in general, for people going through seminary, for women going through seminary that you might want to offer to just kind of have on the record as, yeah.
I guess to say, don't give up and don't get discouraged and give up when things are difficult, when challenges come. Just to depend on your faith. And we get through most situations that come along. It may not be the way we want to, but I think of one friend in seminary that I think if I hadn't been there for the person to talk to, she would have quit and gone home just because she, get discouraged. And we know that God is with us no matter what.
Yeah. I think that's really important, especially right now.
Yeah.
As a seminarian, it's hard to do this, especially during a pandemic. And then the years leading up to the pandemic were me considering, am I doing the right thing, looking at the church and how it is.
Right. Yeah. And just now with the financial burden that seminary is for students, that's something that I didn't have to deal with. And part of that was because of the school I attended. We students at Perkins got 90% tuition automatically. Had I gone directly from Hendrix, they were getting 100% then.
Oh, wow.
But some changes in investments and that kind of thing had knocked it down to about 90%. And loans from the annual conference that could be paid back with a year of service was really the only debt that I had finishing seminary.
So I'm actually, the foundation has a similar scholarship now that I'm on.
Right, yeah.
To where I have to come back for 6 years when I finish seminary, but seems like a pretty good deal if they're willing to help me get through seminary.
Right.
So that was really nice to not have that stress going in.
Yeah. I'm sure it makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, now I just have to stress about the content and not the outside
Yeah.
things. All right. Well, Reverend Moyer, it was really nice to meet you and to have this
Same.
conversation with you.